My name is Tiffany Giesbrecht, and I am the Voice for Life community educator here in Grande Prairie. Voice for Life has been in Grande Prairie and the Peace region since 1985, so 35 years as of 2020. So at Voice for Life, we talk a lot about voice, value, and vision. I want you to understand that your voice is important and who is your safety team around you. I want you to understand your value as a heart, mind, and body, and find relationships around you that will value and respect you as a whole person. And I also want you to understand and have a vision for what is it in life you want. What is that your arrow is pointing towards in life? Because if we don't have a goal, then who knows where we're going to end up. But if we really set a target in life, then we can start to aim and we can start to cut away the things that are taking away from our goal, and we can build those things into our life that propel us forward to what we really want. We're going to talk a little bit about relationships and this guy, the brain. So I love talking about the brain. We got the three main areas of the brain. We have the brain stem, the midbrain, the limbic system, and the cortex and the thinking brain. So healthy relationships. What is a healthy relationship? What helps to build a healthy relationship? And what is our human potential within relationships? Often when I'm in classes and I ask students, what is a healthy relationship? What are the words that come to mind? They'll say things like trust, or they'll say not hitting, or they'll say loyalty, fun. Getting back to setting a goal for yourself. When we identify what a healthy relationship looks like, then we can also see what the counterfeits are. And we can see what is the opposite. If you take the time to sit down and write down, what does a healthy relationship look like to you? What is a priority for you? Then we can also identify when those relationships that steal from those healthy foundations, we can start to set up healthy boundaries and say, nope, that's taken away from our goal of a healthy relationship. So if I were to say to you, what does a healthy relationship look like? Again, people often come up with adjectives like safe or fun. I feel heard, I feel valued. I want to give you a basic lens to look through. And I think all of those adjectives that you may have come up with to describe healthy relationships will fit into the lens of heart, mind, and body. So if you have these three circles then that overlap, and in each of them you are a heart, that's the analogy of your emotions and your feelings and the things you care about, the things you're passionate about in life, the things that you love and have compassion for. And then you have your mind. And they kind of overlap, right? And I use the heart as a metaphor for your emotions, but really your emotions are processed in your mind. We have your choice. You have your mind where you can think through and set boundaries in your own relationship. And then finally, your body. Healthy relationships value and respect your body, right? It doesn't become something that is exploited. It's something that is valued and protected and not taken for granted. With those three lenses, they all overlapped to make a whole you. And so in a healthy relationship, you feel value and you feel respected as a heart with your emotions. Your emotions are never belittled or made to feel like they're stupid. If you have fear or anxiety about something, that's heard. Your choices, your mind, again, valued and respected. So if you're thinking and you're trying to make your own choice, you don't have someone overpowering and making choices for you. Now, as a child, right, your parents make many choices in life for you, but as you grow to become an adult, you cross, over the bridge of adolescence, and you slowly start making your own decisions and your own choices every day. So a healthy relationship is going to give you a boldness and voice in that area to make decisions that propel you towards your future goals. And then finally, a healthy body, right? So you have autonomy in all those areas: heart, your emotions, heard, valued, respected, mind, and body. So those three overlapping lenses we can look through and then take a look and see if that relationship is healthy and have a healthy empowerment to the relationship and to your own development, or is it something that is suffocating or suppressing development in any of those areas? We can take those three lenses, heart, mind, and body, and we can look at it through a neurological perspective too. How is our brain development impacted by relationships that value us and respect our heart, our mind, and our body? So we have the cortex, the limbic system, or the feeling brain, and we have the brain stem, the most basic. The brain develops from the bottom up. So this is our most basic functions here in the brainstem. That's like your automatic, knee-jerk, reflexive type reactions. And so this is survival mode here. Actually, reptiles have a functioning brainstem, right? And so what do reptiles know how to do? Reptiles know how to conquer and consume, right? Think of a community of dinosaurs, right? They're reptiles. What kind of community is that? It's capture and consume. It's very survival instinct based. It's not about building friendships and having good healthy lines of communication. It's about dominance. What does a relationship that is operating in the survival brain look like? It's like a dinosaur community, right? It's kind of terrifying, honestly. So basic survival instinct again, fight, flight, freeze, and then one that's often forgotten is actually befriend. So that's like the underdog who befriends someone so they're not terrorized. So if we think about that in a relationship setting, that's abusive relationship. Domineering, it's either be scared or be scary, right? So it's a good part of our brain to have. So for example, if you're walking down a trail and a cougar jumps out on the trail, your survival brain's gonna click in right away. You don't even have to think about it. You don't have to have the logical part of your brain sit there and weigh the pros and cons. What should I do? Your brain just kicks in and you're either running, frozen, or ready to fight or befriend. One of those instincts kicks in. So it's great if you need to survive. But in a relationship with a friend, if your survival brain is the dominant brain that you're operating from, it's not a healthy relationship. The next one is the limbic system. So the limbic system, again, awesome part of our brain. The limbic system's job is to process a lot of feelings. So specifically this little guy down here, the amygdala. This is actually enlarged during adolescence years. So limbic system goes on overdrive. You know, the typical mood swings are actually a healthy development stage for adolescence. Now the feelings are not bad, right? Our limbic system is good. And the job of the limbic system is to like raise a red flag or any kind of like, hey, this is what I'm feeling, this is what's going on. And it creates like an automatic reaction in the rest of our body. So say you feel angry, you know, when your body tenses up. You're not thinking, I want to clench my fists, I want to clench my jaw. Your limbic system triggers an automatic response, as well as sadness, fear. Fear is gonna kind of boot you down into survival mode. So all these emotions are on overdrive during adolescence years. But the limbic system doesn't self-regulate. Its job is to raise those flags all over the place. Now, hopefully, when we're in a relationship where we're able to voice what's going on in our feelings, we talk about what's going on, whether it's on paper, whether it's through body language, through the way that you choose to communicate. The limbic system can raise the flags, and that goes up to the thinking brain. Now the thinking brain, the cortex, is the last part of your brain to finish fully developing. And it actually doesn't finish growing until you're 25 years old. But in reality, that thinking brain is your personal brakes. He says, whoa, 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 wait a second, maybe this isn't a good idea. It's the communication part of our brain. It's the compassion part of our brain. It's really where our human potential is centered, right? You know, our ability to see someone, have compassion, have empathy, communicate how we're feeling, and also exercise self-restraint in realizing, well, maybe this is an unsafe idea, or maybe this is going to have an impact on this other person negatively. If we think of emotions as waves on a beach, you actually step deeper into the waves, and you feel those waves of emotions, whether it's sadness or fear or anger. They're bigger. They're bigger, they're hitting your torso of your body, they're kind of knocking you off balance, and everything feels more intense. Happy's more happy, sad's more sad, anger is more angry, right? So we have to have strategies for how we're gonna process those emotions. So the job of the limbic system is to flag and then send that information up to the idea center, control center. The part of your brain that says, okay, I recognize I'm feeling angry, what can I do about it, right? Because if that doesn't happen, if we don't send it up to Command Central, where we can weigh pros and cons, think about the long-term impact of what I'm doing now, our body might kick down into survival brain. And then we have a dinosaur community again, which is not the healthiest, and it is not reaching our human potential in that brain development either. So the fuel from those big emotions is what propels brain growth and development. When we communicate and process these feelings that are going on. Here's another story that's really interesting. The brain cortex here, the thinking brain, is like the CEO of the brain. And this is also one really key capability of the frontal cortex, or the thinking brain, is that it can have delayed gratification. So it can see what is my long-term goal, and if I postpone immediate satisfaction, does it amplify my future benefit? There was one study that was done with 700 children around age 3 and 4. And it was the marshmallow study. So these children were given one marshmallow. It was placed in front of them in the room, and the child was told, you may eat this marshmallow right now if you want to, but I'm gonna leave this room and I'm going to come back. And if you wait to eat that marshmallow until I come back, I will give you 2 marshmallows. So in that study, how many of these children do you think waited for the 15 minutes? Because that's a really long time when you're 3 years old. How many of these 3-year-olds were able to wait 15 minutes to get the better deal? The brain's starting to develop that thinking brain and that capacity for a long-term vision. And so in this study, 1/3 of those 700 kids were able to wait for that second marshmallow. Now the study didn't end there. They followed these children for the next 15 years into adulthood and beyond. And they were able to see, did early practice in delayed gratification and the ability to see future goals and postpone immediate gratification for future benefits, was it a predictor in their future life success? You know, success defined as happiness in their relationships, happiness with their job, happiness with their home and their lifestyle. And it was really obvious the connection that happened between the children who were able to postpone immediate gratification. They, as adults, were happier with the relationships, happier and healthier with their bodies, and they were also happier with their occupation. So, interesting, right? Who would have thought that a marshmallow could tell you so much? Here's the thing though, the awesome thing about our brain is it's not just genetics. It's not just you get the brain and God, oh well, I got a bad deal, we move on, right? Or this person over here, they just have an amazing brain. No, you train your brain. It takes effort if something is not natural, like if it's not something you've been practicing since you were 3 years old or 1 year old, or if you haven't had people modeling healthy behaviors around you, but you can. And especially when you practice certain behaviors before the age of 25, when your brain has finished that physical structure and development, the skills that you practice before age 25 have a double punch impact. Now, after age 25, the brain has this amazing thing called neuroplasticity, essentially meaning that you mold it and you make it. I have friends who have lost certain parts of their brain due to a car accident or other traumas that had happened in life, and they are able to train other parts of their brain to take over those jobs that they had originally lost. So you train your brain. So every time we have a big emotion, every time we have a survival brain instinct kick in, we have those opportunities. We can be a detective of our feelings, of what our habits and our processes are. And we can see into our brain and see what we're training. And then we can start to ask ourselves, what kind of brain do I want long term? Because the brain you build now is the brain you're gonna have when you're 85. Pretty fantastic investment, I'd say, and definitely worth the hard work of investing and understanding and setting goals and delaying immediate gratification if you understand the better deal for you long term. So then how can you be intentional about building a healthy dating relationship when we're aware of the neuropsychology, how our brain works? Because a dating relationship, now you've upped the ante and there's more feelings going on, more insecurities coming up, possibly more defensiveness or jealousies, those kind of things. And I just want to say, if you think about it, in a dating relationship, which part of the brain is going to be the one that is controlling and jealous, wants to know what you're doing, where you're doing, who you're talking to, and has to know everything? That's the dinosaur brain. So I like to say, don't date a dinosaur, and don't be a dinosaur in a dating relationship. Actually, a really good tip that someone gave me. They said, watch how he treats the people who seem inconsequential, how he treats vulnerable people like children, like his sisters, like his mom. So in my case, as a woman, how he had practiced for decades treating women in his life who were familiar to him. Those are the practices that would eventually come out to me if I became that familiar constant. So it's a really good habit to stand back and think, how is he or she treating people when they don't think anyone's looking? Another one is tellers, service people, waitresses. How do they treat them when mistakes happen? How do they treat those people when things go right? How do they treat their mother, their sisters, or their father, their brothers? How do they accept being treated as well? How do they act when they think it doesn't matter? That's what character is, where you can see if a person has integrity. And that's pretty much the biggest indicator on how you will be treated when you become the familiar face. So here are 7 secrets to a healthy dating relationship. So number 1, build your relationship on common ground. So that one's pretty obvious, right? If you love art and that's your passion, you're not gonna go hang out with someone or date someone who hates art. So find the things that you love and that you share time together. And honestly, if you can't be good friends because you don't have anything in common, then you don't really have a lot of foundation for a healthy dating relationship. Okay, here's another one. Avoid making snap judgments. So in a dating relationship, there's a couple ways that can happen. You can make snap judgments for the positive, elevating that person. You can also make snap judgments that depreciate a person's value, right? It's always good to stand back and see the whole picture. Personal sharing time. There's 2 memories of my now husband. When I first met him, I remember watching him run across the field in rubber boots and shorts, no shirt on, and carrying a cat. So that was years ago. That was my first impression of him. He still has cat scars from carrying cats around like that. But fast forward, I didn't really see him for quite a long time. And then I remember we had gone on a biking trip and we had a similar group of friends. One day I was eating snacks, biking for a long time. I remember looking down and he had gone on his knees and his little bald head, he'd shaved it bald, and he was begging for my food. So I was amused, but I thought this kid's a joke, right? So in that moment, I was just like, I honestly never thought I'd ever date him. So it probably disarmed my reaction enough that I allowed him to get close enough that we became friends, because I never thought I would date him. And then fast forward to now, we have 6 kids together, and he makes me laugh pretty much every day, and I love being with him. So snap judgments, don't write somebody off, give yourself some time and see, how do you feel around that person, right? Do you feel encouraged and strengthened in your voice? And do you feel valued? Because those are pretty good indicators of somebody you want to be around. Here's another one. Pay attention to values. What is something you really value? And somebody will say hockey, family, video games. Like, figure out what your priorities are, man, right? And then if you value them, find out what the other person values. So if family is really important to you, and this person you're dating is like, oh, your family stinks, so don't come on over here. Like, no, we don't want to hang out with your family. And they're constantly undermining the things that you value. Big red flag, right? They're not valuing your heart and your mind. They're undermining your own autonomy in those areas and the values that you already have. So I'd give them some distance. Number 4 is respect each other's individuality. There's a cute cliche, or the saying, you're my better half, right? It's implying that you're not a whole person unless you're with the other person. Now, you really want to guard against this in adolescent years, and here's why. Developmentally, you are at a stage in life where you're figuring out who you are as an individual. Because as a child, your parents, your coaches, your teachers are making a lot of decisions for you. And now as an adolescent, you're crossing this bridge into adulthood where you're figuring out, well, what are my values? Why does that matter to me? What are my future goals? You have to process these and kind of dig deep and ask those hard questions to develop your own roots. What are you passionate about? What do you love? What are your long-term goals? Don't compromise that development time by jumping in too tightly into a dating relationship, because if you're like romantically involved with someone or you're getting too enmeshed there, you lose that time to develop your individual interests. Because in a dating relationship, you're wanting closeness with the other person, and often you want to just imitate and like what they like in order to be close to them. Here's the reality. Two healthy individuals make a healthy whole relationship. If you can say no, I don't actually really like that, I like this, that means that this relationship is actually building your individuality, and two individuals will make a healthier relationship. And then you have healthy boundaries, you have healthy identity in who you are as a separate person. So number 5, no smothering allowed. So that kind of plays into that respect individuality as well. And it's easy in a dating relationship, it's new, that feeling brain's on overdrive. So you're like, I love this, they love me, we're all together, let's be together all the time. As a growing human being, you need your own time. You need your own time to know who you are apart from that other person. Because if you're together all the time and you don't have room to breathe, you don't have room to grow. So give each other space. If you are confident separately, it will make you more confident together as well. Number 6, remember that love isn't static. So pretty much the point of this is the grass is greener on the side that's watered. Every relationship, we should be standing back and seeing what's working, what's not working. Is this reinforcing my values and my long-term goals? Do I feel like a more confident person, or do I feel more anxious? You're constantly evaluating what's going on in the relationship, but we also have a part to invest in. Number 7 is know your bottom line. If you know what a healthy relationship looks like, then it's easier to know what it doesn't look like. And if you are able to say, okay, you know what? This characteristic over here, like hitting, slapping, rape, those kind of things, those things that are undermining your autonomy in your body, or they're constantly making you feel belittled or stupid, or you don't get to make any decisions, like you're not allowed to like a certain color, or you're not allowed to like a certain restaurant. If you're losing autonomy in that's my bottom line, right? And sometimes in a relationship, we're all growing, right? As human beings, we need to hear the word no to grow. Like I have friends who through high school, they dated and then they weren't, and then they dated and then they weren't. That's not necessarily bad. What happened there was that boundaries were laid out, and they said, okay, this is my boundary, and you're crossing my boundary, so I'm out. There was a no that was used, and then the other person used that to grow. And I think actually a no, saying no, is one of the biggest litmus tests or relationship quality tests that you can throw out there. How does a person respond when you say no? Because if you can't say no, that's unhealthy. And if the other person can't hear no, that's unhealthy. So do they respond in a childish way where it's emotions and manipulations and you hurt my feelings when no is used? Or do they get angry and aggressive and revert down into that survival dinosaur brain with controlling, domineering behavior, right? Red flags. And sometimes people just haven't heard no enough in life to have that chance to grow. So if you care about this person, they're not hearing your no and they're acting in those scary survival brain ways, that's your cue to move on. And hopefully that other person can use the no and say, well, that didn't work out so great. Maybe I have a chance to grow here. Know your bottom line and be able to stick to it. And again, if you don't feel like you have a voice to say no, then that's not healthy. Move on. So looking through those lenses of heart, mind, and body again, we can also identify what an unhealthy relationship looks like. Because it's the opposite of healthy, where respect and value and voice are encouraged, it's the opposite. They're lost. So if you feel your mind, you don't get to make your own choices, you don't get to like a certain restaurant, you don't get to like a certain color, you don't get to like certain clothes, like if someone is making your mind up for you, you've lost your voice there, right? That's manipulative, that's controlling relationship. What about your emotions, right? If you're not allowed to feel uncomfortable and it's minimized or belittled or dismissed over and over and over again, if you're not able to express that, again, that's another area where you've lost your voice. If you don't have autonomy and ability to express your own emotions, that's an unhealthy relationship. Then there's your body as well, right? So what happens if you no longer have control of your own body and the other person thinks they have free access? That's an unhealthy relationship. And that can even cross into abuse or assault type situations. So it's important in each of those areas to test out, do you have a voice there? And even in small situations, for example, I grew up and I remember I've got some great brothers. We would like tickle each other all the time. And I remember having this aha light bulb moment in my teen years where I realized I can say no. But I never realized that. And it was such a light bulb moment. We need to stop or step back and realize that it's the little things. Practice saying no. Just practice it sometimes. And sometimes you just want a little more space. So if somebody wants to give you a hug or a high five, you can say no. And so you want to be able to understand that you have body autonomy in a healthy way. Teen dating violence. So I'm going to use the word abuse. But technically, like in the Canadian legal system, abuse is when someone in a position of power or authority is assaulting someone under their power or authority. Someone older in age, a manager or a boss or a teacher or a parent. If those positions of power are abused to take advantage of somebody under their care, that's considered abuse. In the Canadian legal system, assault is when peers or somebody on the same power scale, essentially, one person is not responsible for the other, they're peers. Assault is what that's called when physical harm or emotional abuse is the word that we usually use in common language. So I'm going to use the word abuse, but understand that in the legal system, there's a differentiation between assault and abuse. We can have physical, right? Physical abuse that can happen with pinching, hitting, shoving, kicking. And extreme situations, it can be excessive tickling, right? It's not something you're going to take to court, but you can recognize that you're losing the respect for your own body space, right? And your own body boundaries. So physical, emotional abuse can also be happening in a relationship. And there's a spectrum, right? It can be death by 1,000 paper cuts, right? The thousands of little comments that add up over time. Or it can be the big explosive verbal outbursts. Those are all valid and they all can take a toll on people, right? So you need to see what is the impact on you. If you're walking away feeling stupid all the time and feeling like you're losing confidence to speak up, it could be an emotionally abusive situation. There's also sexual abuse, right? And so that goes into physical abuse, but then this takes an even closer, more intimate context to it as well. Sexual abuse or harassment, again, there's a spectrum in that, right? So is it comments right up to actual violation, right? Body violation. And then there's also stalking. Stalking is that mental intimidation and pressure. Stalking might seem like it's nothing, but if somebody's presence, pressure, harassment is repeated that way and it's undermining your sense of safety, your mental security, we need to consider that as well and recognize it for what it is. So we got physical, emotional, sexual, and stalking is kind of a quick overview of teen dating violence that can occur. What about online? Online abuse, can that happen? Do you have a digital body? So your digital body or digital representation is any verbal description or any photos of you. Does that count? Does it count as violence? I would say a strong yes, and the Canadian legal system also would agree with that. The impact of digital abuse is very real. This past summer, I had the chance to support trafficking survivors, people who were being trafficked, honestly, by one of the largest Canadian website companies. And their videos were shared as a minor on this site without their permission. And it was videos of them, I'm not kidding, being gang raped as a child. And this was on a Canadian website. They had to experience the abuse, first of all. That was terrifying. But then to know that thousands, hundreds of thousands, even millions of people are viewing their abuse, they feel like they're just re-traumatized day by day. And actually, one survivor that I was in contact with told me that if she had a choice to only live for one more year of life and lose the rest of her life, but she knew by only having 1 year left, every single image of her abuse online would be deleted, she would do it. because that just hangs over her head. So we have to take this very seriously. We all have phones now, right? And so when I was a teen, I'm sure I know I did stupid things and impulsive things in the moment, but it wasn't digitally cemented, right? Never take a picture of yourself with no clothes on. Number one, if you're under 18, that is legally the definition of child pornography. And even by having it in your possession, it's illegal. And even just having it on your own phone. So I was part of a group this past summer that was trying to spread awareness about this Canadian company that has been profiting from sharing these videos of minors and pretending they didn't know. Part of our core team that was doing this, one survivor's gone missing. Another survivor has been in a coma for the last 30 days. Multiple people, including myself, has had personal documents hacked. What is online on your phone is not secure. Don't take nudes. Don't ask for nudes. Don't put your future at risk. Don't put the future of your friends at risk by taking nudes. It's not something to play around with. If you care about somebody, then build a healthy relationship that's not exploiting and that is not putting their future at risk. So my husband's a high-level tech guy, and here's a story about how your photos are not actually secure. Number one is he can be in Texas, and I literally called him up when he's on a road trip doing tech work, and I'll say, honey, I'm ready to break my computer, right? And within seconds, he will be on my computer, moving my mouse, typing on my screen, and that's what hackers do, right? So he only does that. He respects people's boundaries, and he will only do that when he has been given direct permission to do that. If it's online, if it's on your computer, if your computer is connected to the internet, it's not necessarily secure. Here's another thing. My little sister had a whole bunch of photos on her device, and she accidentally reformatted it. So that's the delete of all deletes next to a hammer. The next step up is to use a hammer, and that's the only more deleted you can get. She's in tears and she's lost every single photo on her device because she's reformatted it. But my husband, because he's a tech guy and he's got the skills, he said, whoa, it's okay. He was pretty confident that he wasn't going to come across any inappropriate pictures, and so he said, I can get them back for you. He sat down at the table with her device. Within half an hour, he had every single picture she had ever taken and deleted back. Remember that. What is taken and even deleted on your phone is not actually gone. And for those of you who are using Snapchat, there is a 6-month worth of storage. All those photos that are going on there, they have a giant server that stores the photos that are being shared through Snapchat. So don't take nudes. Don't take pictures of yourself with no clothes on. Even outside of, the child pornography laws and how that impacts your future and hackers, even outside of that, we have this incredible opportunity going online with social media and with all of this technology and the internet. We have an incredible opportunity to go out there and be a voice that encourages others, be a voice that values the heart, mind, and body of other people, right? So use your power, essentially, is what it is. You got a lot of power. Use it for something good. And be aware that every word you put online can come back. You're digitally documenting, cementing what's going on right now. It's easy to look through the news right now and see that people are dragged through the mud for things they might have done 50 years ago. Even though, brain-wise, your brain isn't finished growing to think fully through the pros and cons of what you're doing now, give yourself that extra boost and step back when you're about to put something online and ask yourself questions like, is it true? Is it helpful? Is it kind? And how is this going to impact my future? If you wouldn't share it with your priest, your principal, or your parents, you probably don't want to put it online. There's also a story of a man who was about to win the Heisman Trophy. So I am so sorry if I said that wrong because I'm not a huge football fan, but he was supposed to win the big trophy, right? Then somebody found a tweet that he said when he was 14 years old. So just be aware of the power of what you're tweeting, because that tweet was perceived as racist and it came back and was highlighted right at the height of his career when he's about to win this trophy. And then there's story after story after story vengeful exes who had the incriminating photo because he trusted them back then, and they bring it up right as an athlete was about to sign a big sports contract, and that athlete's contract they lost hundreds of thousands of dollars in that moment. Universities, high profile jobs, they often will pay an unlocking fee to the big social media giants. So even if you have privacy settings up high and you're sharing, like F this, F that, I hate this and F and that, they will see how you conduct yourself online and assess the risk to themselves, whether or not this is a risk they want to invite into their university settings or they want to invite into their job settings. So use your power to build your own future and the future of other people, and to protect your own future and protect the future of other people and those you care about. So what if you are in a situation where you've already shared something? You've shared a nude, or you see someone sharing photos of you. What do? Now find your support system. Who is that adult you can go to who will be able to hear you and help walk you down that road? And there's also needhelpnow, needhelpnow.ca, all in one word. You can go to that website and it will take you through step by step. So if you go to a friend, or you're the friend and someone approaches you and says, hey, I shared this online and I can't get rid of it, now it's being shared over there, and they're terrified, right? Be that friend that helps the other person be bold and go with them to go get the support you need. So go to that website, check it out, see what you need to know. Then go to, whether it's a school counselor or whether it's a parent or somebody who can help you and who has access to people who have the technology to help you get rid of those photos for you. So we did a quick summary on emotional, physical, sexual, stalking, abusive or assaulting type relationships, and online assault as well. And so where can you get support in Grand Prairie? Number one, seek out your school counselors because they'll have the connections, or parents. Who's the adult to make you feel strong and safe? Who's the adult who will walk with you to go find the people that you need to talk to? Is it the RCMP? Is it the PACE Trauma Counseling Center, Sunrise House here in Grand Prairie, the Odyssey House Crisis Line for abusive situations, the Child and Youth Intervention Program? Honestly, your biggest advocate is going to be the adult who you trust. Whether your boundaries are wide open or whether you have high levels of boundary, you have boundaries. So in healthy relationships, we're understanding what is our future goals. We also need to understand what the impact of today's choices are, actions and reactions. And so again, going back to the brain, when we're weighing the pros and cons or weighing the impact of our choices today, we're developing our ability to set goals, to stick to goals, to have healthy boundaries, to use our voice. We need to have the conversation about sexual activity as well. What is the impact of sexual activity? Traditional sex ed talks about basic plumbing, right? It really looks at you just as a basic body, whereas I want you to kind of step back from that traditional approach, and I want you to look through the lens of heart and mind and body. And I want you to see yourself with that whole value perspective. Let's talk about the mind. You have boundaries. Whether your boundaries are wide open or whether you have high levels of boundary. I have a pyramid that I show, and right at the top, it's full lockdown. Honestly, some people choose a celibate lifestyle. That is a true choice that some people have. And then there's right down at the bottom, I sometimes call it Tinder lifestyle. So who cares who, when, where? So what are the different layers of boundaries within that? We need to think through that, and you need to process the impact of sexual activity through your mind, understanding your choices so that you can set boundaries for yourself. So at the top, some people choose a celibate lifestyle. It's your choice, right? If you want to. Then down, starting at the tip of the pyramid, we have no dating at all. So people choose no dating. Then some people choose kissing only. That's their boundary. And then their line is nothing more. Then some people choose everything but, right? And then down we can go to sex only in relationships. So it's like serial monogamy, faithful to one person as you're dating that person, then it breaks off and you're going to another person. And then at the bottom, it's again, no boundaries whenever the opportunity presents itself. So let's look at that pyramid and think, what is the risk involved and what is the benefits of each of those choices. Your boundaries that you choose may change at different areas of life. So maybe you're in school and you're like, you know what? I really want to just focus on my school. I really feel like I need to figure out who I am as an individual. And maybe at that point in life, you're like, you know what? I'm going it alone right now. And then maybe later on in life, you're like, you know what? I'm in a relationship now and I'm going to think through, maybe I'm okay with kissing. But then again, you can break down kissing. You're like, kissing on the cheek, kissing on the lips, French kissing, etc., right? Think it through for yourself, because in the moment, you got all those feelings going on, right? The limbic system is taking over, right? It's not your pros and cons, let me think how this impacts my future brain, that is going to be thinking then. So you got to use this. You have to prime your boundaries before you get into a relationship. And again, going back to using your no, use that no to test out a relationship, because if you don't have a no, that's not a healthy relationship. So at the top of the pyramid, we have no dating. And now this is common in different cultures where arranged marriages happen, right? But to tell you the truth, this is what my brother and his wife did. What are you talking about? How can you get married or just have, no dating until marriage? That's the boundary there. So they had been friends for like a decade. They knew each other really well. They knew how each other treated the people in their life who were closest to them, the familiar faces. They knew that the other person's character had integrity because they had seen how they acted when they thought no one was watching. They'd been friends for like a decade, and then one day they went out for a drive, and then one person, I don't know who it was, said something like, I think I have feelings for you. And then the other one's like, I have feelings for you too. And maybe we should start dating. And then one of them, I'm not sure who, said, well, why should we date? We already know each other, so let's get married. So I'm not kidding. 40 days later, they got married. They now have 5 children and have been married for, I think it's 15 years. So yeah, it can happen. So we go down a step then. Sometimes people have kissing as their boundary, right? So whether it's no kissing or, it's a kiss on the cheek, okay? Is French kissing okay? You have to think through this for yourself. This was my boundary, because I actually like dating. So I actually think dating is a great idea because there's a whole different relationship dynamic that's going on there. And I was not ready to jump in with both feet to getting married. So my boundary was like, I needed to be dating for at least a year. So my husband and I started dating, and then he started talking about wanting to get married. And I was like, no, we're not talking about that yet. So what he decided though, kudos to him. He was a teen, but he understood, without the neuroscience and the brain analogy here, he understood that this brain, the brakes were not fully developed yet. He understood that the biological engine worked pretty good though. So it really doesn't take a lot for your body to figure out how to go all the way. It's kind of like a Ferrari with tricycle brakes, right? You got to understand your own self. Understand how well do your brakes work, right? And so he understood that he wanted to give himself a buffer zone. So he came to me in our dating relationship and he said, okay, how about we don't kiss? At this point now I'm actually attracted to him. So I respected that what he was saying. I actually thought it was romantic because he's come to me now and he said, you know what? I want to have this boundary in our relationship. So I heard what he said and I respected that boundary. And I felt like it was actually cherishing me as a whole individual. Because if you think about it, in a relationship, if you have a foundation of heart and mind communication, and respect and value there, do you think a body connection can come pretty easy, right? So if you have a foundation of communication and respect, do you think a physical relationship would develop in a healthy way? I think so, right? Let's turn it around though. What if you start with a physical relationship? That biological engine just takes over, right? Do you think communication and respect, the heart and mind value and respect there, are going to automatically grow and be a healthy component if you start with the physical component, with the sexual activity? I think it's going to be a lot harder that way. So I felt like it was romantic for him to come to me and say, my goal is to not have sex before I get married. I want that to be you're the one and only. And so we're not even gonna kiss. So yeah, we dated for 1.5 years, and our first kiss was a week before our wedding day. And yeah, it's special. Going back to that pyramid, the kissing boundary area, you have the levels within that, right? Again, think through it for yourself. What level of kissing are you okay with? I think you have to get your brain processing all those questions because they're real questions, right? And they're real boundaries you have to think through. So the next section is that yellow section that says everything but. So everything's on the table or bed or whatever it is, except for actual intercourse. Here's my question with this. I have a couple friends that they chose that boundary. I knew quite a large group of people who chose the everything but. Save sex till marriage, but this isn't sex, so that's okay. How many in this group of, say, 20 people, do you think were able to hold to that boundary? Here's the thing. Your biological engine, once you start flipping the switches, flip this one on, and you get the engines revving and everything's going, how well are those tricycle brakes gonna hold? So if you're one of those people, you're like, you know what, my brakes are great, we're good to go, then more power to you. You choose the boundaries that you think you're comfortable with. But I think for the majority of people, again, respect the power of that biological engine that drives towards sexual activity. Your body knows what to do, and it's designed to propel you forward, right? In that group of about 20 people, I'd say only 2 people were able to hold to that boundary. Because when you start flipping all the switches, eventually it's all systems go. Choose your boundaries wisely. I would recommend whatever your ultimate boundary is, give yourself a buffer zone in there. Okay, so the next boundary, some people choose, I'm okay with sex in relationships. So I'm gonna be faithful to this person because I'm dating them. I just feel so close to them. It just makes me feel so bonded. Because here's the thing, sexual activity actually floods your brain with bonding hormones. And you actually will see that person differently. If somebody has a boundary like that, you have to think, what are the benefits? So some people have told me things like, I feel close to that person, I just really love being with them. But then what are the risks too? In a situation where you're bonding to someone, it's like when you share a secret, right? If you share a really deep secret, part of your soul with someone, you feel closer to that person. Sexual activity is like sharing a deep physical secret, and you feel bonded to that person. But what happens when that bond breaks, right? So take, for example, like what if you have a pet? So this is kind of a pathetic example, but hopefully it gets you thinking about that. So you have a pet, and you care for that pet, and you protect that pet, and you love that pet, and you feel a bond, right? And the pet runs away and disappears. And you're like, oh, okay, well, that's crappy. My pet's gone. So you get another pet, and you pet that pet, and you care for that pet, and you're like super bonded because your pet was with you all the time, and that pet gets hit by a car, right? So let's fast forward 20 pets down the road. You've had many bonding experiences. 20 pets down the road, do you think you're gonna be able to bond with that pet as strongly as you were with the first pet? I would say no. And psychologist Dr. Gordon Neufeld talks about, he's an attachment expert, internationally respected, and he talks about our heart has the ability to perceive a wounding environment. So if the heart is experiencing loss after loss after loss after loss, it starts to put that wall of protection around. But here's the thing, your heart does not differentiate between sad feelings and happy feelings. So what happens as your heart walls off, as your capacity for sadness decreases, yeah, okay, you might be like, oh, that pet is gone. Big whoop-de-doo, I'll get another one, right? You might become callous to the loss, but you also lose the capacity for deep joy in that bond. Saying that, we can go to the bottom level of boundaries, which I sometimes call the Tinder relationship, where people are okay with calling anybody up. Huge risk involved there, right? Number one, you don't know if the person you're meeting is a serial killer or not, right? I know people that met up with people on Tinder and ended up getting raped. Don't put yourself in those dangerous situations. Like, a victim is never responsible for the rape, but you know, just like when we get into a car and we put a seatbelt on, there's some little things we can do to try to help add safety to our relationships. What might the benefits of a Tinder type relationship be? What are the risks involved? List them out. Think it through. What are the benefits now? What are the benefits long term? What are the risks now? What are the risks long term? And go through each of those boundary levels so that you're making an informed choice about what you want and what you want for your future. So once you've understood your boundary, this is what I want my boundary to be. Again, a healthy relationship will give you courage to use your voice. So if you can't have that boundary discussion, relationship's not mature enough to go there. So talking about the role of the mind as well, and what we need to consider with sexual activity, we also need to think about alcohol. With the brain, the first part of the brain that is impacted by alcohol is right here. That's your brakes. That's your ability to have logical thought processes and to think, maybe this isn't a good idea. That's the first part of your brain that comes offline. My challenge to you, if you are choosing to drink, well, number one, be aware of how your body responds to that. Be aware that under the age of 25, the things you do have a double punch impact. So if you find yourself drawn to alcohol and you're losing your inhibition in that situation, be aware the habits you form under the age of 25 are easier to root in. If you are choosing to drink, I would recommend this. You know, they say, bring a designated driver. I'd say bring a designated thinker. Bring a wingman. So if you're a person, you're like, I do stupid things when I drink. Bring your wingman and say, hey, you have permission to stop me if I start doing something stupid. For myself, my own boundary is I won't drink alcohol unless my husband's with me, because I know he's got my back. I know he's not going to let me be in a dangerous situation. So here's some stats. 50% of college students' assaults are associated with alcohol use. Makes sense though, right? If you're taking this part of the brain offline, we're defaulting to more basic, domineering, abusive type responses in there. We don't have the compassion and the communication and the empathy and the basic risk and reward analysis going on. And in 81% of alcohol-related sexual assaults, both the victim and the perpetrator were consuming alcohol. So again, victims are never responsible. Like, they don't ask for a rape, but we can do extra little things, like put a seatbelt on, like make sure we get a car with an airbag, to add those extra layers of security, a wingman, a designated thinker, right? To just add that extra security for ourselves. And if you're prone to making poor decisions, and like honestly, if you realize that your biological engine's pretty strong and you might even be prone to raping someone, bring the designated thinker. Get someone there you trust who will stop you, because you don't want a rape on your criminal record. You don't want that. It's like, think about your future and think about how alcohol affects your brain. Understand yourself. Now let's go on to emotions. How does sexual activity impact our emotions? I say heart for emotions, but really, where's the center of our emotions? It's in the limbic system, the feeling part of our brain. So again, in adolescence, this is all amped up. Everything's bigger here, and the brain is using the fuel of those big emotions to promote growth, hopefully, of our cortex, our prefrontal cortex, our thinking brain. Or the amped up emotions are causing us to regress into our survival brain. So you choose. Be aware of your strategies for big feelings. You know, do you need to go for a run? Do you need to do some push-ups? Do you need to go listen to some music? Do you need to write out your feelings? Do you need to just go talk it out with someone? Do you need a nap? Do you need a snack, right? Be aware of how you process your emotions and have strategies in place. So what's going on in the brain with sexual activity? So this guy here, the limbic system, during sexual activity is flooded with high levels of different neurotransmitters and hormones that are going on. So one of them is oxytocin. So remember when I was talking about the pet? So the pet, you actually have small amounts of oxytocin going on there when you're bonding with your pet, or you're playing, even on the football team, right? You're bonding together. It's low on the spectrum now. But here's the deal. There's two activities in life that the brain is flooded with that bonding hormone, that neurotransmitter, that oxytocin. And those are nursing, when a mother is nursing an infant, and sexual activity. So it changes the brain to see that person in a more favorable light. And if you think about like a situation with an infant, being a new mother is challenging, right? There's dirty diapers, there's nighttime feedings, and so the brain needs to see that infant in the most favorable light, the cutest thing in the world, right? So that you continue to care for and snuggle and keep safe and want to provide and nurture and protect. So that's the impact of oxytocin. If we think about how strongly the brain is flooded with those neurotransmitters and the hormones there, if a mom is willing to do all that for an infant, why is the brain flooded with that neurotransmitter during sexual activity? Well, if you think about it, our bodies are designed for success. If our bodies are engaging in sexual activity, what might happen? A baby could be made, right? So our brain isn't thinking, well, I'm not going to flood with oxytocin because they're not actually trying to have a baby right now. No, your brain is just going to be flooded. The design of our body is to bond to that other person because why? A two-person team creates more safety for this possible third edition. Biologically, looking at it, it just makes sense. Biologically, our brain isn't thinking, well, that's not really their intent, so I'm not going to add the bonding. The brain's just like, no, sexual activity is there, it means bonding is going to occur. We also have dopamine flooding the brain. So dopamine is that feel-good motivator. Often it's associated with pleasure. It's a neurotransmitter that is often addressed when we're talking about addiction. It's released in its highest amount, concentration, naturally through sexual activity. Now there's unnatural ways or synthetic ways to amp up that dopamine, whether it's drugs, gambling, it can be even shopping, can be alcohol. So our bodies have like a natural rhythm of dopamine in everything we do. So say you study for a test and you pass the test, you're like, oh, yes, that's like a bit of dopamine there. It motivates you to study next time, hopefully. Or say you're practicing shots for a basketball game or football game or for soccer, and you are getting your shots. So the effort you've put in is rewarded with dopamine. What we want to guard against is big hits of dopamine with next to no effort. It's like low-hanging fruit on a tree, and if we never have to stretch or grow or climb that tree, the muscle of relationships, essentially, if you don't use it, you lose it. So let's think about sexual activity and dopamine, and let's talk about pornography, right? No relationship needed. No getting to know a person. No reading social cues. No reading body language. But yet your body immediately is getting this huge rush of dopamine. Because for thousands of years in human history, or for all of human history, humans have had to work for relationships that are close enough to be sexually active, right? And you have to build the relationship. Whereas if you just jump right into getting that massive dopamine hit, that limbic system's flooded. So it's hacking a biological reaction in our body that's meant to bond powerfully, right? So our brain's thinking, okay, so this might produce offspring, so therefore I must bond to protect possible future offspring, right? That's built into us. It doesn't recognize the fact that this is a screen. Novelty after novelty after novelty is not having the relationship built into it. It reshapes our brain, and without building our human potential here, where we have communication and we have compassion and we have the ability to read faces and the ability to recognize social cues. Our neurotransmitters and the hormones are actually flooding the brain in a way that changes how we perceive what is going on, changes how we see the other person, changes how we remember things. So, for example, norepinephrine, that is a neurotransmitter that floods the brain during sexual activity as well. And it's like a memory-searing neurotransmitter. So it's like heightened awareness and heightened memory. So that's, for example, if something happens and then years down the road, you know, you smell a certain smell or you hear a certain sound, sometimes your brain can just be triggered right back to that initial memory.
I've been here before.
Where there was a similar smell or there was a similar sound that happened. Your brain sears the memory of sexual activity into your brain. We also have serotonin, which is just that like step out into the forest, big breath of fresh air, feel good, the world as well. That floods the brain. And then there's also prolactin. Prolactin is another bonding neurotransmitter right up there with vasopressin as well. Point is, sexual activity floods the brain with neurotransmitters and hormones so that you are remembering. It changes your feelings, it changes your perception. So we want to be aware of the impact on our brain and on our emotions and see what is the risk and what is the reward. Sexual activity is using our reproductive organs, right? So using reproductive organs, what might happen? You might reproduce. Right? So heart, mind, and body. So we've talked about the impact on our hearts, our emotions. We've talked about the impact or the responsibility of our mind to make choices and to understand the risk and reward of different choices in those situations. Now let's talk about the impact of sexual activity on our body. It's like a life or death type decision, right? You could be creating a whole nother life. You also could be exposing yourself biologically to sexually transmitted diseases. Right? So let's just talk about pregnancy first. Teen pregnancy. Every day in Canada, 40 teens get pregnant. Every day in Canada, 21 teens will give birth and become a teen mother. So that's a lot of responsibility. I think that's why we need to be aware. What's the impact of sexual activity? You might create another life. And then in those situations, you have to look around and see, what are my supports? What are my options in that? In Grand Prairie, we have support centers like the Pregnancy Care Center, which is amazing. We have the health clinics. There's a website called readyornotalberta.ca that is developed by Alberta Health to go through what are the things you need to be aware of in pregnancy. You also have things like teenparents.ca. There's the Pregnant and Parenting Teen Program. So I actually have a good friend of mine. She was pregnant at age 15. Terrified, right? You know, like honestly, pregnancy is a big deal. I was married and I remember when I discovered I was pregnant with my first baby, I was never a baby person. Some of my friends, actually my husband even, if there's a baby in the room, within 30 seconds, he's going to be trying to hold that baby. And he's holding that baby and he's oohing and he's awing. That wasn't me. So the idea of being pregnant and becoming a mom was honestly terrifying. I remember sitting in that vehicle with my husband, and even I had the support system. I had a husband and just crying. Like I was scared and I didn't know what to do. I didn't feel responsible. I didn't feel like I was mature enough, but yet I had support and I had a situation where I could get even more support. And I remember my husband just looking at me and he's like, what? Like, this is awesome. This is great. And he just gave me the biggest hug, right? And I would challenge you, if you know someone who's pregnant, you know, whether it's a teen, whether it's an adult, think, how can you be an encourager? How can you be someone who helps that person feel empowered? How can you support that person? Because that's a big responsibility. That's a big life step. And so don't be the person who brings fear into their life. Be the person who speaks encouragement to them. Go with them if they need it, to go find supports they need. So going back to the story of my friend, she's given me permission to share her story. But at 15, she discovered she was pregnant and terrified, right? Terrified. She was not ready for this, obviously not intending to be pregnant, but then she started sharing it with her family members and her community, and people just rallied around her. And she ended up going through the Pregnant and Parenting Teen Program. Now she has an amazing 15-year-old son, and she looks back and she says it was the hardest and most amazing time of my life. Let's take a minute and understand pregnancy. How Just that work. The average woman will have an egg released in her reproductive system once every 28 days. The uterus lining, so that womb or the room inside the body, that's meant to be the incubator for a future human life, that has thickened and has created a cushy, welcoming, warm environment for that egg. So when the egg is released, that is 14 days after the woman's last menstrual cycle. The uterus sheds the lining for about a week, and then a week after that, an egg is released and the uterus has thickened and created that warm environment. The average woman will have about a 5-day window where pregnancy can occur. Why? Because sperm can live for up to 72 hours inside of a woman, and an egg can live for 48 hours. So approximately 2 weeks after the first day of a woman's period, that is when she is most fertile. Now the body actually sends out a lot of other signals when that ovulation is what it's called, when the ovaries release an egg. So I would encourage any woman to download the apps that help you understand how your cycle is working. When is your body ovulating? What are the signs? How does it impact you? So there's 3 really great apps. One is Glow, one is Natural Cycles, and one is Kindera. So there's like a calendar tracking method, there's like a temperature tracking method. And the really cool thing with Natural Cycles, it was developed in Sweden and it has been proven, and it is also FDA approved in the States. That's how effective it is and how proven it is as a contraceptive or like a family planner. So what are some ways that people try to prevent pregnancy? Well, there's the obvious ones, right? Condoms, birth control pill, which imitates hormones of pregnancy to prevent ovulation, injected hormones. So sometimes a woman will sign up and get hormones injected into her body that postpones her period and postpones ovulation for 6 months. There's also contraceptive patch, which slowly releases hormones into the body that imitate pregnancy again. Because when a body's pregnant, when a woman's pregnant, the ovaries are not releasing more eggs, right? You don't want to have multiple pregnancies during a pregnancy. So the body releases hormones to say, hey, stop ovulation, no more menstruating, because we're going to just incubate this new tiny human, right? Those are different methods that people try to prevent pregnancy. We have to look at this and be aware that there are also failure rates. Out of 100 people who use condoms, how many people do you think are still going to get pregnant in a year? The failure rate for condoms is 18%. So that's actually pretty high. That's approximately 1 out of 5 people using condoms in a year will still get pregnant. Good to know, right? Birth control pills. So if there is proper use, so the woman takes it at the same time every day to keep a consistent hormone level, the failure rate is 9%. But if that is inconsistent, then the failure rate and possible chance of pregnancy increases to nearly double that. So hormone injection, the 6 out of 100 women who get that shot in a year who are sexually active will still become pregnant. Then there is the IUD, which is the intrauterine device, which is inserted by a doctor who's trained to do so. It sits inside of the uterus, that incubator inside of a woman's body. One's copper, one's hormones, but essentially it signals the uterus and the body to do 3 things. One is suppress ovulation. Number 2 is thicken mucus in the uterus to prevent, if there is ovulation that comes, prevent sperm from accessing the egg. And the 3rd is to thin the uterine lining so that if there is fertilization, that it's not implanted. The fertilized egg is not implanted. And I'm just going to add this disclaimer that I'm not actually a nurse and I'm not a doctor. So this is your primer. So you can take this information and then go research it for yourself. But make sure as you're researching, go to reputable sources and health sources that are going to give you reliable information. If you say you're getting the hormone injection, read through that pamphlet inside. Know exactly what it is that you're putting into your body. Know the impact of it so that you can make informed choices. Step back and think, what is the risks and what is the benefits of this? So with the IUD, there's a 0.2% chance of pregnancy out of 100. So out of 1,000 people, there will still be 2 women who get pregnant. Saying that, I know people who work in maternity wards and labor and delivery, and they've delivered babies right along with the IUD as well. So be aware, sexual activity, the impact of it is possible pregnancy. Using your reproductive organs, you might reproduce. What could be some of the benefits of abstinence? especially during teen years, especially when people are investing in other areas of life, maybe their education. What could be some benefits in the immediate, and what could be some benefits in the future? What could be risks now, and what could be risks in the future? So those are things you also have to think about. Abstinence, it's interesting. Out of 2,035 couples that participated in this study, the ones who had waited until marriage to engage in sexual activity actually found that they rated their sexual quality higher, 15% higher than those who had not. They rated the relationship stability as 22% higher. Why could that have the impact that it did? Why could abstinence have improved future relationship stability, future sexual quality and satisfaction? Well, I like to think through that lens, heart, mind, body. So if you've had all this time in the relationship early on to invest in the heart and the mind connection, to invest in communication, to invest in respecting each other's boundaries, then when you have that foundation, it can handle the weight of those neurotransmitters and hormones that flood the brain during sexual activity. It can handle that extra pressure because it's got a foundation in the relationship. So there actually is benefits to abstinence. Again, everyone has to make their own choice. Everyone has to weigh it through and think, what is the risk and what's the rewards long term and in the now? And you have to decide for yourself. But statistically, it's a good deal. Go back to the marshmallow deal too, right? The kids who could postpone that gratification and delay their gratification ended up happier later on in life with their relationships, with their job, and with their physical health as well. Delayed gratification has benefits.
Yeah.
So talking about the impact of sexual activity, we also want to talk about STIs. Right? Also known as STDs, sexually transmitted infections or diseases. So what do we need to know? Sexually transmitted infections are diseases or infections that are transmitted during sexual activity. Does a person need to have intercourse to transmit it? No. Essentially what happens is sexually transmitted diseases or infections go through the mucous membranes of the body. So that is the membrane that protects the exits and the opening of the body, right? So there's viral sexually transmitted infections, there's bacterial sexually transmitted infections, and there's also parasite sexually transmitted infections. So we'll break each of those ones down and talk about what the differences are. One thing that's good to know is bacterial sexually transmitted infections, when they are diagnosed, you can get antibiotics and it can completely clear. A virus hacks into our body's cell and then replicates within the cell. So it's not just an antibiotic that you can take that's going to take out a viral infection. Your body has to fight it off on its own. And sometimes that's something that you carry within your body for a longer period of time, and it can resurface later on in periods of life where the body is under stress and that virus is again triggered. What are the main ways that sexually transmitted infections can be transmitted, right? So through sexual contact, right? Where body fluids are exchanged, or where the mucous membranes protecting the opening and the exits of the body are in contact. During pregnancy, sometimes sexually transmitted infections can come from the mother to the child that's growing inside of her uterus, right? Now, the uterus actually has an amazing filtration system called the placenta, so it actually can block some viruses from coming through to the child. So often if a baby is born while a mother has tested positive for a sexually transmitted infection, the baby will be tested as well. Sometimes the baby's body shows antibodies because it has got the antibodies from the mother's blood, and then often the baby's body will clear that before they're 2 years old. Not always, but sometimes that happens. So the baby looks like they test positive, but then they actually clear. There's also needles, right? Contaminated needles. We actually had a case in Grand Prairie years ago where a tattoo parlor was reusing needles and multiple people got HIV. So here's the deal. If you want to get a tattoo, if they don't seem like extremely particular, even OCD, about showing you the brand new tattoo needles, just walk out, right? It's not worth the risk. There used to be a higher risk of sexually transmitted infections being acquired from blood transfusion, but that was pre, 1990s, before they'd have the technology now and the scanning that they do to prevent contaminated blood from being in the blood bank. So you're actually more likely to be struck by lightning than you are to get sexually transmitted infection from donated blood or a blood transfusion. So what is your risk of exposure? The more people you're sexually active with, it exponentially increases your exposure risk. So if one person has sex with one person, right, your exposure is 1. But then you go to 2, it goes to 4, goes to 8, goes to 16, right? So a former US Surgeon General said, when you have sex with someone, you're actually having sex with everyone that they have had sex with for the past 10 years. And everyone they and their partners have had sex with for the last 10 years. So this is not just some random person making a claim. This is the former US Surgeon General saying, you have to be aware when you have sex with somebody, you're actually being exposed to everyone they've had sex with as well. And who they have had sex with as well. So it's a exponential increase there. An interesting fact is young people account for a substantial number of the new STI infections. So why would that be? Why would young people and teens account for such high numbers? So if we look at gonorrhea, 70% of new cases of gonorrhea come from young people under the age of 25. Now, 63% of chlamydia are young people under the age of 24. 49% of HPV, human papillomavirus, that's again young people. 26% of HIV and 20% of syphilis. And I'll get into what each of those ones are. But those are huge numbers, right? So what happens at 25? Right? The brakes are more developed. Why are young people more susceptible to STIs? The brain is not fully developed, so the delayed gratification is still in development. And so that may put people in riskier situations. Here's another thing that was told to me by a pediatrician as well. Young women, their cervix, so that's that door at the end, the bottom of the uterus, is not actually fully developed until early to mid 20s either. So in teen years, that cervix actually only has a small thin layer of that mucous membrane, which is a protective layer of cells. And so this pediatrician said that as a woman gets older, that layer of protective cells gets to be like 100 cell layers thick. Young women, you're actually more susceptible to STI infection in your teens than you are in your late 20s. It's really good to know. Again, I just want to say that I am not a doctor or a nurse on this, so go to myhealth.alberta.ca and you can get some really solid information, because as I'm talking about gonorrhea and syphilis and chlamydia, I've tried to be really nice in the pictures that I've chosen, so you're not traumatized by what you're seeing, these pictures of the STIs, and you don't have to just start randomly searching gonorrhea on your phones or on your computers. You might get some traumatizing images there or misinformation, right? We don't want to just get fear-mongering information. Go to sources that are reliable, like myhealth.alberta.ca. And if you go to that website, then you could type in the words like gonorrhea or syphilis, and then you're not only going to get a super accurate list of the symptoms, but you can also get a list of high-risk activities where this is more common to appear, these STIs. So let's talk about bacterial STIs first. So bacteria, it's like strep throat, right? That bacteria grows on top of your cells, and if you see it, you can go to a doctor, get it confirmed, or a walk-in clinic. Grand Prairie has a few walk-in clinics, and they can do STI tests for you. And if they confirm that you have a bacterial STI, they can give you an antibiotic, and that can be cleared if they catch it. So let's talk about the first one, chlamydia. Chlamydia is called the silent STI. It is the STI in Alberta with the highest rates. So it's estimated that 3 out of 4 people who have chlamydia don't even know it. Why would that be? It's a bacterial infection in the reproductive organs. So for a man, it's a lot easier to see, right? Because that reproductive organs are external. But for a woman, it's easy for that bacteria to grow hidden inside, right? Because it's not visible. The uterus, you're not taking a look and examining the uterus. The bacteria can get up in the uterus, in the fallopian tubes, into the ovaries, and it can cause extensive damage and scarring. So I know people who've had chlamydia for years and didn't know it, and then they finally got tested, Then they found out and the doctor said, you know what, I'm really sorry. You've had this infection for years and it's damaged your reproductive system, your fallopian tube, and your ovaries. You have a very low chance of getting pregnant. So here's the thing. If you feel bold enough and you've weighed your risk and your reward and you've decided that you're going to take the risk to be sexually active, you need to be bold enough to go get tested. You need to be bold enough to go to an STI clinic because you don't want to have something like this, the silent STI that has infection rates in the thousands in Alberta living in your internal organs for years, right? And also be transmitting that to other people. It can cause unusual discharge, white, yellow, infection, right? Or no symptoms, right? The next one is gonorrhea. Sometimes it's nicknamed the drip. And that one can infect any of the mucous membranes in the body. It's the second most commonly reported bacterial STI in Canada. The symptoms include greenish, yellow, whitish discharge, burning when urinating, burning in the throat, or painful swollen testicles, swollen glands in the throat. So again, if you're sexually active, go get tested. Then finally, the last bacterial infection that we're going to talk about is syphilis. Syphilis is a complicated STI because it comes in stages, and this one can actually lead to death when untreated. Syphilis starts with just an open sore called a chancre, and we actually had an outbreak in Grand Prairie. The past couple of years, they were having unusually high numbers of syphilis in Grand Prairie. So syphilis starts with a small chancre, and then it can lead to fever, and then it can go away and be dormant for a while, and then it can go to a full body rash, and then can actually lead to brain infection if left untreated. Now let's get into the viral STIs. So viral STIs include HPV, so human papillomavirus. It's kind of like a wart that grows on the genitals. There's no pill you can take to just clear it. They have to be burned off, or you just have to let your body, either chemically or doctor's method, or you just have to let your body clear it. This is what Gardasil is supposed to protect you from. Again, just read the package insert and read up all those details on there, because Gardasil only protects from a couple of the many strains of HPV. That's good to know too, so you don't have a false sense of security, realizing there's many different strains of HPV. Next one is herpes. So there's herpes simplex 1 and there's herpes simplex 2. Herpes simplex 1 is just your common cold sore. So the World Health Organization estimates that 2 out of 3 people in the world, so the majority of us, carry that virus in our body. Just like other STIs, but this one's not an STI because it's your common cold sore. It can flare up when the body is worn out or stressed. Herpes simplex 2 is like cold sores that focus on the genital area, right? Very painful. So again, there's not a pill that you can take. You can just strengthen your body's immune system and hope that your body can fight that off. Then there's hepatitis. So hepatitis has hepatitis A, hepatitis B, which there's a vaccine for, and I think it's required if you travel. And there's also hepatitis C, which there is no vaccine and there is no cure. Hepatitis is like inflammation of the liver. And with like hepatitis C, the liver slowly shuts down. There can be cirrhosis of the liver where it like turns black and becomes completely dysfunctional in the body. And then there is HIV. Now HIV is a lot more complicated and there's a lot more layers than that. I would just encourage you to go check it out on the Alberta Health website. But HIV is serious and can progress to life-threatening conditions. So just in summary, STIs can result in groin pain, burning during urination, milky discharge, irritation, testicular pain and swelling, sore throat, itching, milky discharge for women, burning during urination, lower abdominal back pain, nausea and fever, spotting between periods. Essentially, if there's body fluids coming out that don't make sense, if there's swelling, if there's pain, if there's itching, if there's lower back pain. So be aware, make sure you have a doctor you can talk to. There used to be the term used, have safe sex, right? That was the term used everywhere. And even New York, was interesting. They decided, you know what, we're gonna just make sure all these students know about safe sex, and we're gonna just push this message so that we can lower STI rates. And they went on this massive multi-billion-dollar campaign years ago to educate all students on STIs and safe sex. Interesting fact though, what happened? It backfired. They actually ended up having higher rates of STIs. So why is that? And it's interesting to note too that now health organizations no longer say safe sex. They say have safer sex. Because in reality, there isn't completely protected sex. Even condoms, although they protect part of the body and lower risk, if you were looking at those pictures I had shared earlier, do condoms cover all those parts of the body? No. You still have risk, and you can still have silent symptoms that can be transmitted. So be aware, know your risk, make good choices there. So there's two ways that completely eliminate the risk of STIs other than some fluke tattoo, contaminated tattoo needle incident. One is abstinence for life, the celibate lifestyle. It's not for everyone. And then the other way is to commit to one lifelong partner. And if that person is committed to you as well, STIs do not just form out of nowhere. I've had some interesting ideas over the years from students where they think that an STI could just form if you have sex when somebody's having their period. No, it doesn't work like that. The STI has to be transmitted. It doesn't just spontaneously appear. Lifelong commitment to one person who's committed to you, there's no chance of STIs. So that's good news. Another benefit of commitment there. You get to plan. And I would encourage you to think through all these things we've talked about, weigh the pros and cons of all these different choices you have to make. Get some good information so that you can make informed choices. So that you're confident in the boundaries and the goals you set for yourself, so that when you're in a relationship, you can make healthy choices and you can be setting your long-term goals. Boundaries are not just supposed to be lame. Boundaries are not there just to be rules for the sake of rules so we can feel like life is boring. Boundaries are actually, when they're used at their best, boundaries propel us forward. They send us toward the goal and the life that we want. So use them well and make relationships that value you and respect you as a heart and a mind and a body, and respect and value your future and your voice. So, thanks for listening.